to a
She
most
replaced the prince's
splendid
cup,
evening.
and he suddenly understood she saved his life. Its stone walls, darkened with age, were etched with centuries of whispers, tales of kings who had ruled with wisdom and cruelty alike, of queens whose beauty masked ambition, and of a power that hung unseen in the air, as tangible as the cold wind that swept through the halls. Inside, the grand hall glimmered with golden candelabras and crystal chandeliers. Long tables were laid with silver plates and polished goblets, the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine drifting through the air. The court had gathered for the evening feast, a celebration that masked a simmering tension. Everyone wore a mask of etiquette, but beneath the smiles, eyes darted with suspicion. At the center of it all stood Prince Kalen, the heir to the frostbound throne. He was tall and lean, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that held the storm of the mountains. The people admired him for his bravery and kindness, yet there was a shadow to him, a weight he bore silently. He moved among the guests with ease, bowing, laughing, and speaking with charm, but his mind was often elsewhere, lost in thoughts no one could reach. Among the servants and attendants was a young woman named Alara. She was quiet, almost invisible to most, yet her eyes missed nothing. Her hair, black as the raven's wing, framed a face that was plain at first glance, yet when her gaze lingered, it held a strange intensity, as if she could see into the heart of things. Tonight she wore a simple dress of deep green, the color of moss in the winter woods, and moved gracefully among the nobles, offering wine and food. Ilara had been in the castle for months, her true purpose hidden behind the guise of a servant. She was part of an ancient order, tasked with protecting the royal bloodline from unseen threats. Every movement she made was careful, every smile measured. She had not yet revealed her powers, for to do so would draw attention she could not yet risk. As the feast began, the nobles laughed and toasted, their voices echoing against the high ceiling. Kalen raised his goblet in a practiced gesture of courtesy, unaware that danger hovered in that golden wine. A rival noble, Lord Varric, had sent a cup laced with a subtle but deadly poison. It was meant to humiliate Kalen, weaken him, and destabilize the court. No one could see it, no one but Alara. She felt it the moment the cup was placed before him. A cold shiver ran down her spine, her heart hammering. The poison was ancient, a subtle enchantment that would take hours to reveal its fatal effects. She could not let him drink it, yet she had to act with care, for any sudden movement could draw suspicion. When Kalen lifted the cup, her hand moved almost unconsciously. She had prepared her own vessel earlier, one imbued with a protective charm. With the skill of someone trained in silence and stealth, she replaced the prince's goblet with her own. It was a simple motion, hidden by the clatter of laughter and the sound of music from the harpist. Kalen drank, the warm liquid sliding down his throat. He smiled at a passing noblewoman, his charm unbroken, and yet there was something he could not explain. A subtle shift in the air, a whisper at the edge of his mind, told him that he had been saved, but by whom he did not know. Alara stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. She had risked everything for this one act, and yet she could not afford relief. In the palace, secrets were dangerous, and now that she had intervened, the court would be watching, even if they did not know what to look for. The feast continued, and Kalen's attention drifted toward the shadows of the hall. There were so many eyes, so many whispers. He felt a strange unease and awareness that someone, or something, was watching over him. The sensation was fleeting, almost a ghost, but it lingered like a shadow at the corner of his mind. Meanwhile, Ilara moved among the servants, her face calm, her heart still racing. She had saved a life, yes, but the weight of her secret pressed against her chest. The palace was a maze of danger, and tonight had proven how close death could come, even in the glittering safety of a feast. As the evening drew on, Kalen found himself walking the corridors alone, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The stone walls felt alive with whispers, the torches flickering as if to signal a presence just beyond sight. His mind kept returning to the cup, to the inexplicable certainty that someone had saved him. He paused at a window overlooking the frozen gardens. Moonlight spilled across the frost-covered statues, giving them a life of their own. In the distance, he thought he saw a figure, dark and silent, standing among the marble roses. He blinked and the figure was gone. Yet the feeling remained, a sense of protection, of someone silently guiding him, someone who cared enough to risk everything. Alara, too, lingered near the same window unseen. Her breath misted in the cold night air as she watched the prince from the shadows. She wanted to speak, to reveal herself, but she could not. To do so would draw attention, and the palace was never forgiving of secrets. Yet her heart ached with longing, for in him she saw more than a prince. She saw a soul in danger, a life she had sworn to protect. The castle slept uneasily that night. Outside, the wind moaned through the towers, and the trees of the garden shivered as though in warning. Within, Kalen could not rest. His dreams were restless, filled with shadows and whispers. He dreamed of falling, of darkness closing in, and of a hand reaching for him, warm, steady, protective. He awoke with a start, heart pounding. The memory of the cup and the strange sensation of being saved filled his mind. He could not yet name it, but a part of him knew he had been spared from death. Someone had intervened, and that knowledge both comforted and unsettled him. Ilara in her hidden chamber sat in silence. Her hands rested in her lap, and she allowed herself a quiet sigh. The danger had passed for now, but she knew it would not be long before the court, the poisoner, and the shadows of her own past returned to test her. She had saved the prince tonight, yet in doing so she had bound herself to him in ways she could not yet understand. Morning came, pale and cold, spilling light across the frost-laden castle. Kalen walked the halls with renewed awareness, his mind alert for anything unusual. Every shadow, every whispered conversation felt charged with hidden meaning. Somewhere in the palace, he felt certain, was the hand that had saved him, the presence that had watched over his life. And somewhere unseen, Alara prepared for the day ahead. She moved with quiet grace, her mind focused on her duties, yet her thoughts kept returning to the prince. She knew that their fates were now intertwined, though neither fully understood the depth of that connection. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the stone floors, Kalen felt a strange pull, as if the castle itself were guiding him. He did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. A life had been spared tonight, but the forces that threatened the throne were not gone. Danger lingered in every corner, waiting, patient, and unseen. And in the heart of it all, Ilara stood, silent and watchful. She had saved the prince from death, yet she knew that soon he would discover the truth. When that moment came, neither of them would ever be the same. For now, the castle breathed a quiet sigh, and the frost on the garden sparkled like shattered glass. But the shadows were already moving, and the game of survival, trust, and hidden power had only just begun. The castle slept in uneasy silence, though outside, the wind still whispered through the frozen trees. Morning light crept across the stone walls, pale and cold, as if reluctant to enter a place filled with secrets. Prince Kalen moved through the halls with unusual quiet, each step measured, each breath cautious. The night's visions lingered in his mind, shadows that refused to fade, and the feeling of being watched remained, a presence gentle yet unyielding, protective yet hidden. Kalen had never been one to believe in omens or whispers of magic. Yet the certainty he felt, the sense that someone had intervened to save him from death, could not be ignored. He paused in the corridor outside the main hall, fingers brushing the cold stone. He tried to focus on the laughter and chatter of the court as the day began, but every sound, every shadow, seemed charged with hidden meaning. Meanwhile, Ilara moved through the castle with silent grace. The morning sunlight fell on her face as she served breakfast to the servants, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Her heart still raced from the previous night. She had saved the prince, but that act had drawn her closer to danger. She could not remain hidden forever, and each passing moment made the risk heavier. She sensed it before she saw him. Kalen, walking down the hall, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp, scanning the shadows. His steps slowed near her. She forced herself to keep moving, to act as if she were merely carrying trays and tidying the hall. But she could feel his gaze on her, intense and unwavering. Kalen stopped a few feet away, pretending to examine the tapestries that lined the walls. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of something unsaid. Ilara nodded, offering a polite, measured smile. "Good morning, Your Highness." Her tone was respectful, but her heart betrayed her nerves. Each interaction with him was a delicate balance between concealment and truth. "You've been quiet lately," Kalen said, stepping closer, though still careful to maintain courtly distance. "Is something troubling you?" Ilara's hand trembled slightly as she placed a tray on a nearby table. "No, nothing," she said softly. Yet she could not hide the subtle tension in her body, the way her eyes flickered to him for a brief instant before dropping to her tasks. Kalen studied her carefully. Something in her demeanor was different from the other servants. There was a steadiness to her movements, a confidence hidden beneath apparent subservience. His intuition, already heightened by the events of the night before, told him she was the one who had saved him. But how? And why had she remained hidden? Over the next few days, Kalen found himself observing her from afar. He noticed the small gestures, the way she moved silently, the way her eyes scanned the halls, always alert. There was a strength behind her silence, a sharpness that hinted at knowledge and skill far beyond that of a mere servant. And yet, there was also something fragile, something she guarded carefully. Ilara, for her part, felt the pull toward him as well. She tried to suppress it, to remind herself of her mission and the dangers of attachment. But every time he passed her, her pulse quickened. His presence was both a comfort and a challenge, a constant reminder of the life she had saved and the secret she must maintain. One afternoon, Kalen decided to confront his growing curiosity. The palace garden stretched behind the castle, frozen under layers of frost, but still beautiful in their stark winter silence. He found her there, tending to the marble fountains that had long since stopped flowing, their waters frozen in delicate shapes. "Ilara," he called gently, his voice cutting through the crisp air. She froze, turning slowly. Her eyes met his, wary and uncertain, yet drawn to him as if by some invisible thread. "Yes, Your Highness," she replied, her tone cautious but polite. I have a question," he began, stepping closer, careful not to alarm her. "Do you remember the feast the other night?" Ilara's breath caught. Her mind raced, wondering if he had discovered her intervention. She forced herself to remain composed. "Yes, of course," she said. He studied her for a long moment, as if searching for something hidden in her expression. "Someone saved me," he said finally, his voice low. "I don't know who, but I know it wasn't luck. Someone protected me." Ilara's heart thudded in her chest. She wanted to deny it, to keep her secret, but a small, involuntary tremor ran through her hands. She lowered her gaze. "The court is dangerous," she said softly. "Sometimes protection comes in ways we cannot see." Kalen's eyes softened, but the intensity in his gaze did not fade. "I don't want to just guess," he said. "I want to understand. Whoever saved me, I need to know them." Ilara felt the weight of his words. To reveal herself now would change everything. Yet to remain silent, she realized, might risk losing him entirely. She chose her words carefully. I cannot say," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But know this, no harm will come to you while I am here." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft crunch of frost underfoot. Kalen felt an unusual warmth in her words, a promise he could almost trust. And yet he could not shake the feeling that her truth was dangerous. that it carried a weight far heavier than mere words could convey. Days passed, and the tension between them grew. Kalen found himself drawn to the gardens, to the corridors, to any place where he might sense her presence. Ilara, too, felt the pull, struggling to maintain her composure while guarding the secret that bound them both. Each glance, each fleeting touch of the hand as she served him, was charged with meaning, though neither spoke it aloud. One evening, the prince wandered the castle's hidden corridors, following a strange instinct. The air smelled of damp stone and distant fires, and the shadows seemed deeper than usual. He felt her presence before he saw her, a quiet energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. "Ilara," he called softly, stepping into the shadows. From the darkness she emerged, graceful and silent. "Your Highness," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her heart. He closed the distance between them. "I cannot ignore this," he admitted, his voice low. "I feel that you saved me. I know it. Please tell me the truth." Ilara's heart raced. She had trained herself for years to hide her abilities, to conceal her identity, to serve without attachment. Yet now, faced with the prince's insistence and the weight of his gaze, she realized the truth could not remain buried forever. I protected you," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "But there are things you do not understand. I cannot explain fully, not yet." Kalen reached out, gently taking her hand. The contact was electrifying, a connection that spoke louder than words. "Then let me understand," he said. "I am no longer a child to be shielded from danger. If you have saved me, then I trust you. Show me who you are, and I will face whatever comes with you." Ilara looked into his eyes, searching for doubt, but found only sincerity, courage, and a quiet determination. She nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. "Very well," she said, "but we must be cautious. The court is not forgiving, and not everyone will accept what we are about to reveal." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant noise, a faint crash echoing through the corridors. Both froze, alert. The castle was supposed to be quiet, but the sound was unmistakable, urgent. Kalen's hand remained in hers, grounding them both. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice firm. Together they moved toward the source of the noise, careful and silent like hunters in the snow. As they turned a corner, they glimpsed a shadow disappearing into the hall beyond. Ilara recognized the movement instantly, a familiar hand, skilled in stealth, yet unknown in intention. Whoever it was, they were fast, deliberate, and dangerous. Kalen's pulse quickened. "Who are they?" he asked, though he already suspected. Ilara shook her head. "I don't know yet, but we must be ready." They followed the trail of shadows through the frozen halls, their hearts pounding, minds alert. The castle that had seemed so safe and familiar now felt alive with secrets, its very stones whispering of danger. Every step drew them closer together, not just in purpose but in trust. The bond formed in the night of the poisoned feast had deepened, tempered by shared vigilance and growing understanding. Finally, they reached a chamber at the far end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a figure hunched over a table, rifling through documents. Before they could approach, the figure paused, sensing their presence, and vanished into the darkness beyond. Kalen clenched his fists, a mixture of frustration and determination surging through him. "We will find them," he said, his voice low but unwavering. Ilara nodded, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time she sensed that they were no longer merely protector and prince. They were allies, bound by choice, by trust, and by a fragile but growing connection. Yet as they returned to the corridor, the castle seemed to sigh around them, the shadows deeper and more restless than before. Danger was never far, and the court had eyes and ears everywhere. Whatever had saved Kalen once could not protect him forever, and the world they navigated together was full of unseen threats. Still, for a moment, they allowed themselves a quiet recognition of what had begun, not just trust, but something far more profound, a bond that would be tested by fire, darkness, and secrets yet to be revealed. And in the silence of the corridors, as snow drifted against the high windows, the castle seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that the prince and the woman who had saved him were no longer alone, and that their story was only beginning. The frost-laden palace seemed quieter than usual, but the silence carried weight. Every corridor, every frozen marble staircase felt alive with secrets. Prince Kalen moved with a purpose now, alert to every sound, every shadow. The incident in the gardens, the shadowy figure in the hall, it had awakened a new vigilance in him. Danger was no longer a distant whisper. It was real, close, and insistent. Alara followed him from a short distance, her heart heavy with unease. The events of the past days had tightened the invisible thread that bound them together. She had revealed a fragment of the truth, that she had saved him, but not the full weight of it. Her heritage, her curse, the ancient powers that ran in her bloodline, these truths could destroy him if they were revealed too soon. Yet she knew the time was approaching. The longer she delayed, the more perilous it became, not just for her but for Kalen. There were forces at work in the palace that sought power, not life, and secrets had a way of surfacing when least expected. Kalen paused at the entrance of the old chapel, its stone walls cracked and weathered. Sunlight filtered through shattered stained glass, casting colors that danced across the frozen floor. The chapel had once been a place of prayer and reflection, but now it felt like a tomb of forgotten truths. "Ilara," he said, his voice echoing slightly, "I cannot ignore this anymore. I need to know the truth, about you, about why you saved me, and about these shadows that follow us." Ilara hesitated, her eyes tracing the fractures in the stained glass. She had long feared this moment, the necessity of revealing the curse that had shaped her life. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to him. "There is something I must tell you," she began, her voice low but steady. "It is not easy to hear and it may change everything between us, but you deserve the truth." Kalen nodded, his eyes unwavering. "I am ready," he said simply, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. Ilara began, her words deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries. "I was born into a lineage accursed from long ago. My blood carries a power that can harm those I care for, even unintentionally. That is why I have hidden who I am, why I serve in silence. The poison at the feast, I saved you because I could not let the curse or their plots take your life." Kalen listened in silence, absorbing each word. The warmth in her eyes, the earnestness of her tone, made him trust her even as the revelation startled him. He felt the gravity of her confession, yet he did not recoil. "You could have told me sooner," he said finally, his voice calm but edged with concern. "But I understand why you didn't. I still don't fully understand, but I trust you. I know you saved me not out of obligation, but because it was who you are." Relief washed over Ilara, but it was tempered by the knowledge that trust alone would not protect them. She motioned for him to follow her deeper into the chapel, where shadows clung to the corners and the chill of winter seemed almost alive. "I must show you what the curse is," she said softly. "You need to see it to truly understand the danger, but I cannot promise it will be easy to bear." Kalen did not hesitate. "I am not afraid," he replied, though his fingers brushed hers briefly, an unspoken promise of solidarity. Ilara led him to a small alcove in the chapel, where an ancient mirror stood, framed in twisted black iron. The glass was darkened by time and dust, but her voice carried authority as she spoke. "The mirror reveals the essence of the curse," she explained. "It shows what lies within, both the power and the danger. Only the one who is affected can see the truth fully." Kalen stepped forward, peering into the glass. At first, he saw only his reflection, pale and determined. Then the surface shimmered, colors twisting and coalescing into shapes that felt alive. He saw himself surrounded by darkness, and within it, a figure, Ilara, glowing faintly with light yet bound by shadowy chains. The image moved and shifted, showing flashes of fire, frost, and unseen forces that seemed ready to strike at any moment. Alara's hand rested lightly on his arm. "The curse is part of me," she said. "It can protect, but it can also destroy. I have trained to control it, but it is not always enough." And the court, the nobles, they would see it as a weapon, not as a gift, but as a threat. Kalen stared at her reflection, then at her face. "I do not see a threat," he said firmly. "I see someone brave enough to save my life, even when it meant risking her own. That is what matters to me. Not the curse, not the power, but the choice you made." Alara felt a warmth in her chest she had rarely allowed herself. His words were a shield, stronger than any magic she possessed. And yet, she knew their trials were far from over. The shadowy figure she had seen in the halls days before, the whispers of plotting nobles, the danger that still lingered, these were only the beginning. "We must break it," Kalen said suddenly, his tone determined. "Whatever this curse is, I will not let it dictate our lives. Tell me how we do it and we will face it together." Alara hesitated. "The curse can only be weakened through a ritual," she explained. "It is dangerous and it requires complete trust. You must face your deepest fears, and I must confront the darkness in my bloodline. If either of us falters, it could be disastrous." Kalen took her hands in his. "I trust you," he said, "and you can trust me. Whatever comes, we face it side by side." For the first time, Alara felt a fragile sense of hope. Their bond, formed through courage, secrecy, and the shared act of survival, had grown into something stronger. Yet the path ahead was perilous, and even the smallest misstep could shatter the fragile trust they had built. That evening, they began preparations for the ritual. Alara gathered rare herbs, crystals, and enchanted candles from hidden chambers beneath the castle. Kalen observed carefully, learning to understand her power, the rules that governed it, and the focus it required. The act of preparing together deepened their connection, each movement deliberate, each glance weighted with unspoken understanding. As night fell, the castle seemed to hold its breath. The corridors that had once felt alive with whispers were now silent, as if the very stones waited to see what would unfold. Alara led Kalen to the center of the chapel, where a circle of candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. "Once the ritual begins," she explained, "we cannot stop until it is complete. You will see things, visions of your fears, of your past, and perhaps even the darkness within yourself. Trust yourself and trust me." Kalen nodded, his hand finding hers. "I will." The ritual began with a low chant, words older than memory, carried by Alara's voice like a river of light through the shadows. The air grew thick, charged with energy, and the flames of the candles danced violently as if alive. Kalen felt a pressure building in his chest, a pull on his thoughts, memories, and fears. He saw fleeting visions, faces of those he had failed, moments of regret, and shadowy figures closing in from all sides. Alara's voice was steady, guiding him, anchoring him. "Focus on me," she instructed. "Do not let the shadows take you." Together they moved through the visions, confronting fear and doubt. Kalen faced the weight of responsibility, the fear of losing those he loved, the fear of failing his kingdom. Alara confronted the darkness within her bloodline, memories of ancestors who had wielded their power recklessly, and the danger that lingered in her very essence. For hours, they battled the invisible forces, their trust in each other growing with each challenge. And finally, as the first light of dawn filtered through the chapel windows, the shadows began to recede. The circle of candles burned steady, and the air, once heavy with tension, felt lighter, freer. Kalen looked at Alara, exhaustion etched on his face, yet a fierce pride and admiration shining in his eyes. "We did it," he said softly. "We faced it together." Alara allowed herself a small, weary smile. "Yes," she whispered, "but this is only the beginning. The court will not forget, and there are those who would use my power against you, against us. We must remain vigilant." Kalen took her hand in both of his, holding it tightly. Then we will face them together, no matter what comes." For a brief moment, the world outside the chapel felt distant. There was only them, standing side by side, bound by courage, trust, and the beginnings of something far deeper than either had expected. But as they left the chapel, a chill wind swept through the corridors, carrying a faint whisper that neither could ignore. The shadow watches, and it waits for the moment to strike. Alara's heart tightened. She knew the warning was not idle. Danger still lingered, closer than ever, and the choices they had made had drawn attention. Yet she also knew that, with Kaelin by her side, she could face it, whatever it might be. And Kaelin, feeling the weight of her gaze, understood something profound. The woman who had saved his life was no longer just a protector. She was his ally, his confidant, and perhaps something even more vital. The frost outside glimmered like shattered glass in the morning light, and the castle seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Waiting for the trials yet to come, the dangers yet to surface, and the truth still hidden in shadow. The castle seemed alive that night, its stones whispering warnings, shadows twisting like living things. The corridors, once familiar, now felt like a labyrinth, each turn threatening unseen danger. Prince Kaelin moved with quiet determination, every step measured, every sense alert. Alara followed closely, her heart pounding, not only from fear, but from the bond between them that had grown stronger through every peril. The shadows that had haunted them for days had grown bolder. The whispers of the court, the dark intentions of rivals, and the unseen forces connected to Alara's cursed lineage converged, creating a storm that threatened the very walls of the palace. Tonight, there would be no hiding. They had faced visions and illusions, but now reality itself would test them. Kaelin stopped at the throne room, its grand doors slightly ajar. The hall beyond glimmered with the cold light of torches, their flames flickering against the polished marble. He could feel the energy in the air, a dark, oppressive force waiting for them. "Alara," he said softly, his hand finding hers. "Are you ready?" She nodded, her eyes fierce with resolve. "I am. Whatever comes, we face it together." The moment they stepped into the hall, the shadow revealed itself. A figure cloaked in black, its face hidden, moved with unnatural speed, circling them like a predator. Kaelin drew his sword instinctively, but Alara raised her hands, drawing upon the ancient power within her. The air crackled with energy as the shadow advanced, its form flickering like smoke. "You cannot escape me," the shadow hissed, its voice layered with echoes of past betrayals and malice. "The prince belongs to death, and the bloodline it belongs to me." Kaelin's grip on his sword tightened. "Not while I draw breath," he said, stepping forward. "Whatever you are, you will not harm her or me." Alara moved beside him, her presence glowing faintly, the power of her lineage flowing through her like a river of light. She could feel the curse stirring, a force both dangerous and protective. It pulsed through her veins, and she knew that tonight control would matter more than ever. The shadow lunged, swift and silent. Kaelin's sword met the attack, sparks flying as steel struck an unseen force. Alara's hands glowed as she chanted softly, ancient words resonating through the hall. The energy pushed the shadow back, but it was relentless, testing their limits, probing for weakness. "Alara!" Kaelin shouted as the shadow struck toward her. She parried with a burst of magic, her power surging in response to her fear and determination. In that moment, she realized something vital. Their bond was their strength. Every fear, every hesitation would weaken them. Together, they were unstoppable. Kaelin advanced, fighting alongside her, their movements synchronized as if they had always known this rhythm. The shadow twisted and changed, manifesting visions of Kaelin's worst fears, his kingdom in ruin, the death of his people, and his own failure. But he kept his focus on Alara, on the trust and courage that had brought them this far. "Alara, now!" he shouted. She nodded, understanding immediately. Combining their strength, she poured the power of her bloodline into him, anchoring him against the visions. Kalen felt the weight of fear and doubt lift, replaced by a clarity he had never known. Together they pushed the shadow back, forcing it to confront not just them, but the light that burned between them. The shadow recoiled, letting out a sound like wind through hollow bones. It swirled, darkness gathering, preparing for a final strike. Alara's arms trembled from the effort, but she did not falter. Kalen stepped closer, his presence steadying her, his sword ready to defend against any attack. "You are not alone," he whispered, his words carrying more power than any weapon. "We face this together." The shadow hesitated, as if uncertain. The bond between them radiated, filling the hall with a light that was not solely magic, but trust, courage, and the raw determination to survive and protect one another. In that moment, Alara realized the curse could be controlled, not through isolation, but through love and trust. With a final surge of energy, she channeled the power into the shadow. The dark figure shrieked, dissipating into a wisp of smoke that vanished into the corners of the hall. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Kalen lowered his sword, breathing heavily, and looked at her. "Alara, you did it," he said, awe and admiration in his voice. She smiled faintly, exhaustion in her eyes. "We did it," she corrected, "together." Kalen stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You saved me again," he murmured. "Not just from the shadow, but from fear, from doubt, from everything that held me back." Alara felt warmth flood her chest, but she kept her composure. "And you saved me," she said softly, "by trusting me, by standing with me, even when you could not fully understand. That is the greatest gift." For a moment they stood in silence, the echoes of the battle fading into the walls. The castle seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had held it captive for so long. They were victorious, yet both understood that life would not be easy. The court remained a maze of politics and suspicion, and the shadow of danger would always linger. But for the first time, neither felt alone. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. As dawn broke over the frost-covered castle, sunlight spilled across the throne room, illuminating the marble floors and gilded pillars. Kalen and Alara stood side by side, hand in hand, a silent promise passing between them. The trials of the past days had forged more than trust. They had forged something enduring, a connection deeper than fear or danger. Kalen lifted a cup of wine, offering it to Alara with a gentle smile. "To survival, and to what comes next," he said. Alara accepted it, her eyes meeting his with quiet intensity. "To what comes next," she echoed. The castle seemed to shimmer in the light, its ancient stones reflecting their triumph and the promise of a future built together. Yet even in the warmth of the morning, a subtle chill lingered, a reminder that the world outside the palace was vast, filled with challenges they had yet to face. Kalen turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. "We have faced death and shadows, Alara, and yet here we are. Whatever comes, we will face it together." She nodded, the weight of her secret lifted slightly by his understanding. "Yes," she said, "and together we are stronger than any curse, any shadow, or any danger." In that moment, the frost outside sparkled like diamonds, the castle basked in the golden light of the new day, and the bond between prince and guardian became something unshakable. Their hearts, once shadowed by fear and secrecy, now beat with courage, trust, and the possibility of love unspoken but deeply felt. Yet even as they stood there, a faint sound brushed the edges of the throne room, a soft, deliberate tapping, almost like a warning. Neither spoke of it, but both felt the truth. The world beyond the palace walls was vast, and their journey, though victorious today, was far from over. For now, however, the trials of the night had ended. The shadow had been defeated, the curse tempered, and the prince and the woman who had saved him stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the frozen gardens, Alara allowed herself a small, genuine smile. She had faced the darkness, revealed her truth and found not only trust but something far more profound. Kaelin's presence was no longer just a reminder of what she protected, but a promise of what they could become together, stronger, unbroken, and united. The frost on the windows glittered like shards of glass, reflecting the light that filled the throne room, and in that moment the palace seemed alive not with shadows, but with hope. The curse had been faced, the danger survived, and a new chapter had begun, one where trust, courage, and the bonds of the heart would guide them through whatever darkness might come. For Prince Kaelin and Alara, the night of shadows was over. The dawn had come, and with it, a promise that neither fear nor curse could undo. They were together, and together they could face anything.